And again, welcome. Thank you for joining our webinar this morning, our Developing Value-Added Agriculture Business webinar. Thank you for being here. My name is Troy Duggar. I was trying to get my video started, not that you really need to see my face, but it's not allowing me to do that for some reason this morning, so I'm not sure about that. Regardless, we're going to continue on. My name is Troy Duggar. We're Center for Profitable Agriculture, and we're located in Columbia in Murray County. I'm a program coordinator with the center. We're with University of Tennessee Extension, and we're in partnership with the Tennessee Farm Bureau is how our office is set up. We will introduce our other speakers kind of as we go along this morning, and we're certainly glad to have them. Most of the program today will be centered around some information that Chuck Morris of USDA Rural Development will have for us, and Dr. David Hughes with the University of Tennessee. We'll have some other speakers join us as we go along this morning. And Hal was one of the ones that are responsible for these type meetings that they've had over the last few years. Hal Pepper, he retired from our office back in November, but he's with us this morning, and I've just asked Hal to share a few thoughts about some of these meetings in the past and maybe what kind to expect today. So Hal, if you don't mind to join us for just a couple of minutes, we appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Troy. I appreciate that very much. I'm glad to be with all of you again, and appreciate Troy for taking the lead in setting this webinar up and coordinating this educational offering. As Troy said, I retired back in November. I still have a real interest in seeing folks in Tennessee get the value-added producer grant. And about a year and a half ago, I talked to a rural development specialist in South Carolina to learn why so many of their value-added producer grant applications got funded. And from talking with her, as many of you know, the value-added producer grant is complicated. And she recommended that you find somebody that can help you understand the questions that are in the application and break those questions down into smaller parts and make sure that you answer all the questions completely. The presenters today will help you do this. They'll help you understand what the application is looking for and how to answer those questions, and they'll also remind you that, you know, some questions are asking for the same information, but you still go ahead and answer every question completely, even if you've already answered that. And you want to make sure that your grant proposal is eligible. And you want to do that before you spend the time writing your application. So the speakers today can help you with that. They can help you understand what projects are eligible and what are not, so you can avoid making the mistake of spending a lot of time working on this application to fund something that isn't eligible. So I encourage you to take advantage of this opportunity to learn from these presenters today. They want to help you apply for eligible projects. So thank you very much, Troy, for letting me be a part of this today.
Hal, thank you for joining us. We appreciate that. I know you've got some good experience with this program, and we appreciate you spending time with us today. And if you've got some comments as we go along, Hal, please feel free to enter anytime you would like to. I think everybody has done this, but I'll ask you to mute your microphones, please, just to kind of keep down any background noise that we might have as we go along. You can cut your video off if you want to, don't necessarily have to. We're going to try to address the questions that come up today. We know there will be many. We would kind of like to try to hold those to the end. We're going to have some time for that as well at the end of our program today. I would ask you to sign in, use the chat, and just to sign in with your first and last name. That's how I'm kind of going to take some roll today of who is with us. So during today, sometimes if you'll just sign in with the chat, just give me a first and last name, that would be helpful to me as well. At the end of the program, I will send out a survey link, kind of a feedback form, just to kind of gain information from you about how we can how we're doing or what we can change to do these things a little bit better. I apologize for the 2 emails yesterday. I didn't have a good morning yesterday. I sent an email to everyone, forgot to attach the agenda. So I sent you another one, and then I noticed another mistake. I had it in it. So I had left off a name at the very bottom. We'll have later today Jade Clark with Ag Launch joining us instead of Pete Nelson. Some of you got the correct one. Most of you did not. So I made a couple mistakes yesterday morning, but that's kind of par for me sometimes. We're not going to have any breaks, so if you need to step away, please feel free to do that. We've got a lot to get through in a short amount of time. We're shooting for 3.5 hours, so we're going to just kind of keep going. If you need a break, please feel free to step away. We're glad to have many USDA rural development folks with us today. I think we've got some extension agents on the call as well, and we're glad to have them and all our producers also. We've had a good response to the meeting. We've got many people signed up. I apologize that we didn't get to have some of the in-person meetings we planned, but as I got the registrations back in, there were just a large majority of the folks that wanted the webinar. So that's the way we went with it for this year. We'll see maybe what we can do next year, maybe with an in-person meeting if that is possible. From the sign in, I think we've got about 4 states represented. We got most folks from Tennessee, of course. I think we've got some from Mississippi, Virginia, and I think even one from Wyoming that has signed up today. So again, we appreciate you being here. We appreciate the time and the interest that you have in this particular program. With that being said, we're going to move to Chuck Morris with USDA Rural Development. Chuck's got a couple of sections that he's going to cover. And Chuck, I'm not going to bother you again until about 9 a.m. Central Time, 10 Eastern Time, if that works with you. So Chuck's done a lot of work in this in the past. We appreciate him being with us. And Chuck, you should be able to share your screen with us, I do believe.
Okay. Good morning. I just wanted to turn on my camera and say good morning to everyone. Introduce myself. I'm Chuck Morris. I'm our program coordinator for Value Added Producer Grant for Tennessee. I also wanted to take a minute. I think a good bit of our staff is on. I'd like for our staff, if possible, to turn on your camera one at a time. Start in East Tennessee and work your way west. If you want to start and just introduce yourself real quick and tell what area you cover.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for that, Chuck. Again, my name's Chance Lamb. I'm our business program specialist for East Tennessee. So basically the 16 surrounding counties of Knoxville all the way up to Mountain City. So if you've got any project ideas that you have in mind that are a result of this meeting today or something that you've had from the past, you can feel free to get in touch with me and we can discuss whatever you guys have going on. Thank you.
I'll go next. I'm Chris Battle. I'm in the Chattanooga area office. So if you have any projects in my region, I've got 10 counties in Southeast Tennessee, as well as covering for Cookeville right now. So if you've got anything in the Upper Cumberland District, I will be your contact for those projects. And I look forward to seeing your projects come through. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. This is Beverly Buckingham.
Good morning.
Hello.
I can hear you.
Good, thank you. I'm Beverly Buckingham. I am the rural business specialist for the Nashville area and the Lawrenceburg area. So if you have any questions, I cover the 13 counties in the Nashville and approximately 10 counties in the Lawrenceburg area. So if you have any questions or if you have any applications that are coming through, we'd be glad to get those in and work with you on those. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Roe Hughes. I am the area specialist over here in West Tennessee. So glad to be here this morning, hoping to have some good discussion on VAPG. And if you've got anything in West Tennessee, feel free to reach out to myself or Chuck, either one. Thanks.
Hey, Roe, can you restate your name again?
Roe Hughes, R-O-E, Hughes, H-U-G-H-E-S.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank y'all.
Thanks,
Good
Roe.
morning, everyone.
Oh, sorry, Josh.
That's quite all right, Chuck. Good morning, everyone. Josh Wilkerson. I'm the area director for the business programs field staff here in Tennessee. I appreciate the invitation to participate today and appreciate Chuck's work on this as well. Please feel free to reach out to any of the staff around the state or to myself at any time with any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. All right, I'm going to start to share my screen here and we'll get it rolling. Tell me when y'all can see my screen. Can you all see my screen?
I'm not seeing anything right now.
Okay, let me try that again then.
Okay.
I think I know what it is. Bear with me just a moment. All right, so can you all see my screen now?
Got your screen.
We got the screen.
Okay.
Yes.
All right,
Yeah.
let me bring, now can you see the presentation?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
All right, thank you. All right, I'll get started then. So just as a start, the purpose of the value-added producer grant, it's to provide funds for economic planning activities or eligible working capital expenses to enable viable agricultural producers to develop businesses that produce and market value-added products and to create marketing opportunities for such businesses. So that I kind of want to lead into this. It's kind of explain to you what value added is not, because we get a lot of questions and people want to do a lot of things that we really can't do with the program. So it's not a job training program. It's not intended to teach you how to farm. It's not for technical assistance or research and development. It's a grant, not a loan program. And it's not intended as a continuous stream of capital. So the value added funding cycle for this upcoming fiscal year, for the current fiscal year that we're in, it's expected to be $31 million. So the application deadlines are not known yet. Every year we publish what's called a NOSA, Notice of Solicitation of Applications. That's expected to come out in February. They haven't indicated if that's February 1st or February 28th or somewhere in between. But there will be a 90-day application window. So if it comes out the 1st of February, it's going to have you somewhere around the 1st of May as when the application deadline would be. So just to give you kind of an idea. So the maximum award amounts is $75,000 for a planning grant or up to $250,000 for a working capital grant. This requires a 1-to-1 match, a dollar for dollar match. The match can be made up of cash or eligible in-kind contributions to be used only for eligible project purposes. So in the past couple of years, because of COVID funding, we've had a reduced match opportunity where you only had to put in 10% of total project cost. That is no more. So we're going back to the standard for the program, which is the 50-50 dollar for dollar match. The grant period can last up to 36 months is the maximum time of the grant period. So funding priorities. They have certain priorities that they kind of reserve funds up to 10%. Total funds are available for beginning farmers or socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, mid-tier value chains, and persistent poverty counties. If you choose to apply under one of those, you just have to document it through the toolkit. It explains to you how it has to be documented to show that you fit within that. So VAPG by the numbers, just to give you a little idea of what our past has been in the program and kind of what we're hoping for going forward. Last year, we received $70.8 million in application requests, a total of 482 applications. Of those applications, 342 of them at $54.4 million were eligible. We were able to fund 197 of those at $33 million last year. So here it breaks down the award grants by type. So as you can see, the majority of the applications we see are working capital applications, planning applications. There were just 11 of them total, accounting for 5.58%. Here breaks down the average award amounts. The average grant amount is $167,000. Average working capital is $175,000, and average planning is $37.8,000. So here breaks down the actual type of applicants. So you can apply as an agricultural producer group, a majority controlled producer-based business, a cooperative, or an independent producer. As you can see, the majority of applications that we receive are independent producers as a general rule. That's most of what we see. So here breaks down Tennessee to get a little more specific for you. So I wish this graph were prettier. I have to admit, I'm a little frustrated with the graph. As you can see, it started really good and got up really good. And we did have extra money. As you can see, that was a double year, 2019 and 20. We received, we had 2 million, just over 2 million in requests that year. And 2021, we came back down to 788,000. And unfortunately, last year in 22, we dropped to 474,000. Now, I do want to say in that, and I'll explain some stuff later, but that 474,000 could have easily been that 788,000. We had a lot of what I would have considered to be good applications last year. And unfortunately, the scoring is really competitive and really nitpicky. And I'll show you some examples later in my presentation. But ultimately, we had some people who unfortunately just made a minor error in the way they answered or didn't give enough detail on something. And unfortunately, they lost a lot of points as a result of it, which kept them from getting funded. We had 2 applications that were in about 1.5 points of meeting the funding deadline or the funding cutoff. So we easily could have been at 788 or higher, maybe even close to $1 million. So here breaks down the number of projects awarded in Tennessee. So you can see back in 16 there were 4, and then we jumped up to 5. And then 1920 we jumped all the way up to 12, which was great. 21 we dropped back down to 7, and then last year we just had the 3. But like I said, that 3 could have easily been 5, maybe even more if we just had a couple things that could have been improved on some of the applications. And hopefully, as we discuss that will help. And I'm hoping if those people are on the call that they definitely consider applying again. Basic program requirements. So basically, it gets broke down into applicant eligibility, project eligibility, purpose eligibility, other eligibility requirements, and then the evaluation criteria. So we're going to start with applicant eligibility. So applicants must meet the definition of one of these types. They must either be an independent producer, an agricultural producer group, a farmer rancher cooperative, or a majority controlled producer-based business. Like I said before, majority of what we see are independent producers. So an independent producer is an individual agricultural producer or an entity that is solely owned and controlled by agricultural producers that are directly engaged in production of subject agricultural commodity. Entity equals partnership, LLC, corporation. Steering committees. Independent producers can also be steering committees or agricultural harvesters. So I think a steering committee is pretty self-explanatory. You form a legal entity, meets the requirements of one of the 4 eligible applicant types, and that's how you apply as an independent producer. The agricultural harvesters, they're a little different than what we normally think of when we're thinking of a typical farmer. This covers like commercial fishermen or loggers, and you don't have to necessarily be logging your own logs as long as you have a long-term lease. So if you've got a person that owns a sawmill and they're leasing ground and cutting timber and actually producing logs, or if they're using it to produce pallets or anything of that nature, anything they're adding value to that as an agricultural harvester, they can apply. So agricultural producer group, formal nonprofit membership organization that represents eligible agricultural producers and operates with a mission that includes working on behalf of their members. The majority of the applicants' membership must meet the definition of independent producer. The majority of the applicants' board of directors must meet the definition of independent producer as well. Farmer rancher cooperatives, a business owned and controlled by agricultural producers that is incorporated or otherwise identified by the state in which it operates as a cooperatively operated business. Note, agricultural harvesters do not meet the definition of a farmer or rancher, therefore not eligible to apply as farmer rancher cooperatives. Majority controlled producer-based business. It's really just what it sounds like. Majority controlled producer-based business venture means that a venture greater than 50% of the ownership and control, which is held by one or more producers or one or more entities, 100% of and control of which is held by one or more producers. So that explains the entity definition again. And please note that only 10% of the available funds will be awarded to eligible applicants in this category. So, you know, if that category fits you better than an independent producer, then that's fine. But just consider that you are limiting yourself to a small portion of the overall funds available. So here's a chart that breaks down kind of, and I'm not going to try to go over this. Troy, you're going to share this presentation with everyone.
Yes, if that's all right with you,
Okay.
Dr. Hughes.
All right, yeah. I'm gonna, guys, I'm gonna try my best not to read this whole presentation to you. And if y'all have questions, you can put them in the chat and we'll answer at the end, or however you want to do that, Troy, whatever you think keeps it flowing the best.
Yes, either way, if you want to put,
Okay,
I'll try to monitor that and either keep them to the end, or we'll just see how our time kind of goes.
okay, that'll be fine. All applicant types must meet the definition of agricultural producer, an individual or entity that produces an agricultural commodity through participation in day-to-day labor management and field operations. So all 4 applicant types must currently produce, and this is key, you must currently produce and own more than 50% of the raw commodity that will be used for the value-added product. So if you're a cattle farmer and you're planning to process, and if you're wanting to process cows into cuts of meat, and you're talking about processing 50 cows, then you must have at least 26 of those cows that are yours that you're not going to actually purchase to process. So keep that in mind. And you must also own the product from its raw commodity state through production of the value-added product, except for a mid-tier value chain. Multiple grant eligibility. So for those of you that have had a grant in the past or have one that's currently still going, this is where you'll want to pay attention. Applicants, including separate but related entities with greater than 75% common ownership, may not submit. Okay, so this actually applies to even people that doesn't. So you can't submit more than one application in response to solicitation if you have more than 75% common ownership. So if you have let's say you have an operation where you've got part of the family's growing vegetables and other parts raising cattle, and all family members have ownership in both entities, then you wouldn't be able to apply. So you got to kind of keep that common ownership in mind. Consider submit more than one application. Working capital applicants for grants may not submit applications for the same project that was previously received with working capital funds. Proposals from previous recipients should be substantially different in terms of products and or markets, and not merely be extensions of previously funded projects. So I'll give you an example here. We've had a cattle farmer who started out producing and selling cuts of meat in the farmer's market, and then they later came back and moved on to restaurants. So keep that in mind. You've got to be changing markets. You're doing something different than what you previously did if you're going to come back for a second application. Multiple applications continued. Documentation to verify includes detailed work plan, budget, and scoring criteria, discussion to sufficiently demonstrate that the project is substantially different. So when it comes to this kind of stuff, it's key that you be thorough and explain yourself. And that's one thing that I can't say enough. Anyone interested in applying for value-added producer grant, details. Be as thorough and detailed as you can possibly be, because it can make a difference in being funded or not funded. This is probably one of the most detail-oriented grants that we have in terms of being very, 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 very big deal. You've got to have good details. Active VAPG grant. So applicants with an active value-added grant must close out that grant within 90 days of the application deadline to be eligible for a subsequent competition. So if you're finishing up one, you got to make sure that you're going to be done with it within 90 days of the application deadline to be eligible. Project eligibility. Applicants must use one of the following methodologies as defined in the definition of value-added product. Your product must either be a change in physical state grapes to wine, produced in a manner that enhances value. That'd be like organic. Physical segregation. That's where you're actually segregating your crop or something of that nature. Farm or ranch-based renewable energy. If you've got a renewable energy type product that you're producing on the farm. Locally produced agricultural food product. That's one we're starting to see a lot more of. And a good example of that is if you've got let's say an apiary, and you've got bees and you're producing honey. If you're just producing honey for consumption, you're really not changing the physical state. So you could jar that honey and sell it as a locally produced agricultural food product, or you could have sweet corn, things like that. So those are things that are going to fit within that category, as long as you're selling it within the state of Tennessee or within 400 miles of where it's raised. You have to do that in order to meet that. And I may have got ahead of myself talking about them here, but here's examples of change in physical state, milk into cheese, wheat into flour, wool into clothing, rugs, corn into ethanol, livestock into packaged meat. Produced in a manner that enhances value. Value-added product results from the use of recognizably coherent set of agricultural production practices. And this gets into where I was talking about, like organic. So I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but you get the gist of that. Here's your examples: organic or eggs produced from free-range chickens. Physical segregation, GMO corn separated from the non-GMO corn. So that kind of explains that. Farm or ranch-based renewable energy agricultural commodity is used to generate renewable energy on the farm or ranch owned or leased by an independent producer. Examples of that's dairy manure into methane and electricity generated on the farm, corn into biodiesel generated on the farm, generation of energy from wind, solar, geothermal, and hydro sources are not eligible. So the key is that you've got to be taking an agricultural commodity in making actual energy from it, as opposed to some of your standard renewable energy practices. Locally produced agricultural food product, like I said, within 400 miles. An example: specific local grapes with characteristic or local sweet corn advertised and sold at a premium as fresher, locally produced alternative to non-local produce. So hemp-related projects. This is one that comes up a lot. We're starting to see more and more of hemp. Tennessee finally did adopt the 2018 Farm Bill as it relates to hemp, and so the key with this is what you're doing with the hemp. So if you've got hemp related questions, I would recommend reaching out to me afterwards. But I'm going to try to give you my simplest generic rundown of kind of give you an idea of what's eligible and what's not. So hemp gets really muddled when it comes down to what you're doing with it. If you're producing hempcrete or construction materials or clothing, something of that nature, then that's no problem. That's all going to fit within a value-added product. But if you're producing something like CBD oil or something for medicinal purposes, we can't do that. So basically, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, and the DEA both view hemp as an unapproved drug, or CBD anyway. If you were to take hemp and produce something for medicinal purposes, it has to be approved by FDA and DEA. And then they currently do not consider like CBD to be a drug, or they consider it to be a drug but not a legal drug. So even though you're having it sold out in stores and stuff, the FDA actually regularly sends out warning letters and stuff to people telling them that they cannot market the products as having medicinal value. So therefore, we really can't touch that side of it at this point. Now, that may change down the road, but at this point, we cannot. So, project increases. So all projects must demonstrate that there's an increase in customer base and a greater portion of revenue derived from the value-added process returned to the producer. So you've got to show an increase in customers and an increase in income for your project to be eligible. So expansion of customer base. Include a baseline number of current customers for the commodity of the value-added product, include estimated target number of customers. So the key is that you're going to have to show us what you currently have and what you hope to have. Per the definition of value-added product, an increase of baseline customer revenues from the sale of agricultural commodity. So once again, same thing, you're gonna have to show us a baseline of what your current revenues are from sale of your value-added products and what you're projecting them to be. So purpose eligibility. So this goes back to the two types of grants, planning and working capital. You know, once again, maximum 75 and 250. So a planning grant it's pretty simple. You pay a qualified third-party consultant for the development of feasibility study, a marketing and business plan related to the processing and or marketing of a value-added product. So if you're out there and you're thinking about getting started into producing a value-added product, but you haven't started doing it yet, this might be where you want to start. You know, this will give you the opportunity to use the funds to determine, you know, if it's feasible for you to move forward with what your ideal is for your value-added project. And it'll also allow you to get that feasibility study marketing plan or business plan that you may need to come back and apply for the working capital grant in the following year. So it's kind of like taking baby steps, walking you in, getting you started, and then you'll be ready the next year to apply and start, you know, actually producing your value-added product and apply for the working capital grant to assist with that. The working capital grant, on the other hand, is to pay eligible project expenses related to processing and or marketing of a value-added product. So there's variations on working capital grants. The planning grant, there's not. The request of 50,000 or more for emerging market proposals. So an emerging market proposal must be produced and marketed. You must be producing and marketing a subject product less than 2 years at the time of application in order to apply for an emerging market of 50,000 or more request. All applicant types can do it, but it's required for cooperatives, agricultural producer groups, and majority controlled producer groups. You must provide a project-specific feasibility study and a business plan related to the processing and marketing of the value-added product. The feasibility study must be qualified or prepared by a qualified third-party consultant. So the second option is request of 50,000 or more for market expansion. So this is for independent producers only, which would fit a lot of you most likely. Must be for existing value-added product that they have produced and successfully marketed for at least 2 years at the time of application. And in lieu of an independent feasibility study for this project, the applicant may submit a business or marketing plan. So that'll be substantially cheaper for you, where you're not having to hire a third-party person to conduct that feasibility study. That will save you some costs for sure. The third choice is a simplified application. That's all applications requesting less than 50,000. All applicant types are eligible. You're not required to provide a feasibility study and business plan, but you must demonstrate expected increases in customer base and revenue returns to the producer applicants supplying the majority of the agricultural commodity for the project. So that's really more geared towards someone who's just getting started. Maybe that you don't even have a customer base yet, so your increase is going from 0 to 20 or to 50, you know, that kind of thing. So here's a comparison of emerging market versus market expansion. I'm not going to try to read it all to you, but as you can see, it just kind of lays out the differences between the two. The working capital applications, so new to the Farm Bill back in 2018, working capital applications must include a description of the direct or indirect producer or food business benefits intended by the eligible entity to result from the proposed project within a reasonable period of time after receipt of the grant. So work plan and budget. This is a very important part of your application. This is where you tell us where you're going to spend the money, how you're going to spend the money, and who's going to carry out those tasks. So you notice the word detail there. Provide a detailed narrative, work plan, and budget. Once again, details, details, details. Be very sure to give good details of how everything's going to take place. Because this is going to kind of like, for lack of better words, your budget, if your application is approved, is going to be your Bible for how you administer the funds and use the funds in your grant. How the project's goals will be accomplished, including a narrative description of the eligible activities and associated tasks. a budget breakdown of all estimated costs allocated to those activities and tasks, and identification of key personnel responsible for overseeing and conducting those activities and tasks. Continuing on, timeframes for completion of the activities. That is important. You have to document that in your budget, or you will lose a lot of points, the kind of points that will change your likelihood of getting funded. Identification of sources and uses of grant and matching funds for all activities and tasks. You've got to tell us where your matching funds are coming from. You got to document it. If it's coming from a bank account, we want a copy of a bank statement. If it's coming from a loan from Farm Credit, we want a copy of a letter from them telling how much money you're eligible for. A grant period that meets start and end date requirements. So you have to have a grant period that is within the 3-year maximum time that's allowed. And you always want to start your grant period on October 1, because that's the start of a new fiscal year. And we have to spend our allocation of funds by the end of the current fiscal year. So you always want to make sure that your project starts on October 1. So if you're applying this year and you want your project to be 3 years, you would show a grant period of October 1, 23 to 9/30 of 26. So just that simple, just literally show, or I'm sorry, 9/30 25. I added a year there. But so you just basically want to show the time period. Program income. So in the grant world, program income is an ugly word. We don't like it, but we do have to document it if there is program income. Basically, program income is earned during the grant period as a result of project activities that must be managed and reported accordingly. Most people can show during their grant period with expenses and everything considered that they're not profitable during their grant period. Therefore, you really don't have any program income. If you do have program income and you report it, you basically, it can essentially reduce the amount of grant that's been awarded to you based on your income that you have of program income. Because if you're making money on the grant, then you don't end up actually needing all of the grant. So that's kind of the gist of it. And you can look up 2 CFR 200.80 for more information on that. Kind of learn a little more about it. Matching funds. Applicant cash, loan, or line of credit. Applicant or family member in-kind labor can count toward matching funds, but it cannot exceed 25% of the project cost, and it must be documented in a way to justify what you can't just create and say, oh, well, I'm worth $50 an hour. You have to actually come up with some documentation. There's some wage page sites out there that can give you reasonable hourly pay rates for certain types of things that you're doing on the farm. So that can be used to document, but you can't exceed 25% of total project cost. Applicant produced raw commodity may be used as an in-kind match as long as it's appropriately valued. So, it may be that if you're a cattle farmer, you want to value your some of your inventory of the cows that you're providing to the project as some of your match. That's fine. You just got to have a reasonable market rate on there that you can document how you arrived at that. You can't just grab a number out of the air. You've got to have some kind of documented value. Third-party cash or third-party in-kind contribution, including non-federal grant sources. Matching funds must be equal to at least the grant amount, at least 50% of the total project cost. So they must also be spent on eligible expenses. Spent in advance of grant funding for every dollar of grant funds disbursed, not less than equal to the amount of matching funds will have been expended prior to submitting the reimbursement request. So basically what that's saying there in a nutshell is that at any point in time throughout the grant, you must have spent at least $1 of grant funds for every dollar of value added matching funds. You must have $1 matching funds in for every dollar of grant funds that you've spent to that point. So you can't ever get ahead where you're requesting more grant funds than you have matching, because we won't be able to award it. For eligible sources without a real or apparent conflict of interest. So there can't be any kind of conflict of interest with your matching fund. Eligible and ineligible uses of funds. This is a section to pay attention to. Eligible use of planning grants, real simple. It's to pay a qualified a third-party consultant to conduct and develop a feasibility study, business plan, or marketing plan associated with processing of your value-added product. Common examples of eligible uses of working capital funds: pay for the cost of processing a raw commodity into a value-added product. A common one we see is paying the slaughterhouse to process your cows into cuts of meat. That'd be a good example. Product packaging and labeling. Let's say if you're a winery, we could pay for wine bottles and glass and labels and stuff like that, or ingredients. Pay for promotional materials for your business and your product. Pay for advertising. To go a little further, you can pay for social media advertising, websites, those kinds of things. Anything that's going to help market, advertise for your value-added product. So examples of ineligible. Here's some of the most common ones we see. Expenses related to agricultural production. So basically, we're paying for everything after harvest. We can't pay for anything related to production. So if you're showing us a list of your employees and you're going over what they're going to be doing for the project, and you tell us that you've got your farm manager who's responsible for tending to the cattle and feeding the cattle and stuff, and he's part of the funds in there, then your project's going to be deemed ineligible because it's agricultural production. We're looking for your person that, if you're at a winery, we're looking for your person that's actually making the wine or helping make the wine or packaging the products or out at the farmer's market selling your products, that kind of expenses, not the agricultural production expenses. Planning, building, or repairing facilities. This grant's not intended to work with real estate. Can't do anything there. Use of grant funds to pay self or associated parties for subject raw commodity. We cannot buy your inventory of cattle from you. You can't receive money in any way from the grant, you or family. So if you're planning on hiring someone that you intend to pay out of the grant funds, you can do that, but they cannot be family. There can't be a conflict of interest there. Ineligible equipment expenses. So that's one of the most common things we see with this is we get people who want to buy equipment for actually taking the raw commodity and producing it into the value-added product. We cannot do that. Equipment is not eligible for this grant. So I took time to go ahead and pull 2 CFR 200 for you, and this breaks down the difference between equipment and supplies. So pay careful attention to this. Equipment means tangible personal property, including information technology systems having a useful life of more than 1 year and a per unit, keyword per unit, acquisition cost, which equals or exceeds the lesser of the capitalization level established by the non-federal entity for financial statement purposes, or $5,000. So in a nutshell, what that's telling you is if your equipment on a per unit basis does not exceed $5,000 in cost, then it is not equipment. I'm not going to read you the next definition, but it's supplies. It's the exact opposite. If it's under 5,000, it becomes, they deem it supplies instead of equipment. So that being said, for those of you out there who have equipment, really supplies, if they're under $5,000, the federal government considers them supplies, not equipment. So say like if you're buying something for an apiary, something to spin your honey or something like that, and the cost is under $5,000 per unit for the equipment you need, then it is not deemed equipment in the government's eyes. It is supplies and it's eligible for use. So keep that in mind.
Hey, Chuck, this is Troy. I'm just giving you a 15-minute warning.
Okay, let's see. Trying to figure out what slide I'm on. I think I'm in good shape.
Thanks, sir.
Ineligible expenses continued. Applications with ineligible expenses of more than 10% of total project costs will be ineligible to compete for funds. So if you submit an application and more than 10% of your project costs are ineligible, your application will be deemed ineligible. If it's less than 10%, we can still deem you eligible, but you're going to have to reduce that 10% off of your total project costs and update your budget and work. Grant period eligibility. The maximum length of a grant period is 36 months. We can give up to a 12-month extension, but even with that 12-month extension, you still cannot exceed 36 months per RD 4284.927C. So you've got to have your project done within 3 years. No questions. I mean, that's it, period. Completeness eligibility. Applications must contain all required elements to be eligible to compete for funds. Information submitted after the application deadline will not be accepted. So if you don't have it all by the deadline, then you don't have a complete application and you're going to be deemed ineligible. Evaluation criteria. Performance, the applicant suggests one or more relevant criteria to be used to evaluate whether or not the primary goals or objectives of the project are being met. So that's where you tell us what your goals are for the project. You have to give us at least one. All applicants estimate how many jobs are expected to be created or saved as a result of the project. Methodologies provided in the application template that David will go over with you later. Working capital applicants record data of expansion of customer base and increase of revenue from applicant eligibility section. So here breaks down the scoring of how applications are scored. So nature of the proposed project, that's where you're going to give details of what your project is. And there's a breakdown on the score sheet that goes into specific details of what they're looking for. I can't tell you enough how important it is to address each one of those. I would even suggest making each one its own little heading and address it in a paragraph under to make sure that you don't miss one. Because if you miss one, we start taking off points. And it doesn't take long before those points add up. And it's going to make it where it's hard for you to be deemed eligible. Qualifications of project personnel. I've got an example here in a minute. That is one of the most common places that we see people mess up. And it's usually very unintentional on their part. We had 3 or 4 applications this year that lost enough points to probably make a difference in whether or not they were funded this last year because of that. Commitment and support. That is a really simple section. You basically get commitment letters from end users who are going to buy your products, and you get letters from third-party folks who are going to maybe help you, whether it's someone's help you with marketing or someone. The number of letters you submit, you get 2 points or 4 points, depending on if you submit 1 or 2. And that can make a huge difference in what gets awarded and what doesn't. In your letters, you can type the letter for the customer and let them sign it, but your letters have got to be detailed. You can't, like a common example is, a good example, like for someone who's a meat producer, you'll get a letter from someone saying, I'm Joe Smith and I've bought meat from such and such for the past 10 years. They've got a great product. Thank you. Sign their name. Unfortunately, we can't count that because they did not give a commitment to continue to buy that meat. So the key is that there's got to be a commitment. So you want it to say, this is Joe Smith and I've bought meat from such and such for the past 20 years and I'll continue to purchase meat from them. They've got a great product. Thank you. That would be enough. It comes down to just the little details, and that's where I go back to the details. Your work plan and budget make up 20 points. You've got to be detailed there, and you've got to be concise, and you've got to be clear as to what the funds are being used for, who is the person overseeing the use of those funds, and you've got to break down the match, whether it's in kind or cash, and you break down the grant portion, how much is going to each category in your work plan and budget. The priority points are pretty cut and dry. Applicants must discuss technological feasibility, operational efficiency, profitability, economic sustainability. Those are some of the topics that I was talking about that you'd want to have a heading for each one and give details about each one. And there may be one of them that you think doesn't apply to you. Okay, if it doesn't apply to you, then I would at least mention it so that someone can see that you've at least addressed it. It may be that you say, due to the nature of our operation, this doesn't apply. Or, none of those things, all of those things should apply. But I'm just saying, if there's something in there that it's asking for in the criteria of the scoring, Be sure to read it and give good details. Demonstrate the potential for expanding the customer base. Applicants must reference third-party data and other information to specifically supports the value-added product. Applicants must also discuss jobs expected and created to be saved as a result of the project. Here's the project personnel. Applicants must identify who will be responsible for completing work plan tasks, show that all individuals have necessary qualifications and expertise for all tasks. Commitment and availability of any consultants or other professionals to be hired. So that's where a letter from the consultant talking about that they're going to commit to help you with your project and what they're going to do, how much time they're going to spend. That gets down into the availability. So all those things need to be addressed, or it's going to cost you, it can cost you a lot of points. Specific qualifications required for any positions unfilled at the time. I can't tell you how many projects we've had lose points because of that. They'll say that they intend to hire someone to run their front desk at their farm store and that they're going to pay them $15 an hour. That's all good and fine, but you didn't tell us what qualifications that person has to have. Is it a high school education? Is it 1 year of college? Is it experience in retail, 2 years experience in retail? What is it that you're going to require of that person? That is very, very important. And I know it can seem like, even the simplest little job or task, and it doesn't seem that important. But for the purposes of this grant, these grants are so competitive. There's so many applications, as you could see earlier, for a minimal amount of funding available. I know 31 million sounds like a lot of money, but when you start breaking it down potentially at $250,000 at a time, it's really not that many projects when you're competing nationwide. So once again, details, details, details. So here's an example I want to share this one. This is the one that we seem to lose a lot of points on. I'm going to read it to you. You must identify everyone, owners, staff, contractors, consultants responsible for managing, performing, and the proposed task in the work plan, including a summary of their qualifications and expertise. Describe their roles, responsibilities, and commitment and availability to the project. If staff or consultants have not been selected at the time of application, provide specific descriptions of the qualifications required for any positions to be filled. That includes the consultants. Even though you won't be hiring them as your employee, you are contracting them. So you still need to give what you're going to expect a consultant to have in terms of qualifications and expertise. Attach additional pages as necessary. Applicants must demonstrate strong credentials, education, capabilities, experience, and availability of project personnel that will contribute to a high likelihood of project success, will receive more points than those that demonstrate less potential in those areas. So I've highlighted this section here for you to get you to understand the importance of this. 1 to 4 points will be awarded if qualifications and expertise of all staff is not addressed, or if the necessary qualifications of unfilled positions are not provided. That is the one right there. We have seen where unfilled positions, the qualifications weren't provided, or the expertise, whatever, was not provided. And it literally meant that the best score that we could give someone out of 20 available points was 4. I can tell you that 16 points will keep you from getting funded. I can assure you of that. And it's a shame because we had several good applications last time that lost those 16 points. Had they had them, more than likely that number of 3 applications funded I showed you would be closer to 6, maybe even 7. So, that's very unfortunate, and I want to try my best to prevent that from happening this year. So as you're going through the evaluation criteria, please take time to read these paragraphs and make sure that you're addressing everything that's needed to be there. I had a professor in college that always said that, you didn't have to give me a long paper as long as you tell me what we'd need to know. That's the same thing here. You don't got to write a novel, but we need to know the important details, and you need to address what has to be addressed in order to get these points. Commitment and support. Producer commitments to the project are evaluated based on the number of producers. End user commitments are evaluated based on potential output to be purchased. And third-party commitments are evaluated based on the nature of the contribution to the project, necessary technical assistance, storage, processing, marketing, and distribution. Applications with multiple producers named involved in the producer will receive more points than a single producer. So if you've got a husband and wife that both work on the farm, be sure and identify them in an application. That'll get you that extra point. End user commitments will be evaluated based on the potential identified market. So here's another thing, you know, if you're out there selling cuts of meat, let's say, it shouldn't be that hard for you to get 2 letters instead of 1. As you can see, it'll cost you 2 points. 2 points can be the difference in being funded. I mean, I'm not going to guarantee that it will be, but you definitely rather have them than not have them. Level of commitment. So here's the last 2 cycles of this program, people haven't been used to having to be required to put cash in, and technically you're not. But if you don't put in at least 50% matching contribution of cash, you get 0 points. So if you're putting some, as I was saying, putting skin in the game, if you're putting cash in the deal, you're more likely to get points, and those points can be crucial to getting funded. Use the same budget and work plan developed for eligibility. Keyword emphasis on a detailed narrative discussion and emphasis on detailed breakdown of cost of each task. Your budget is one area that you definitely want to give good details, and it's a considerable amount of points available. Priority points, it breaking down if you're a beginning farmer, a veteran, or a veteran farmer, socially disadvantaged, mid-tier value chain, small, medium-sized farm, or farmer rancher cooperative, you can get 5 priority points. You just have to document it. Additional priority points up to 5 points will be awarded for agricultural producer groups, farmer rancher cooperatives, and majority controlled producer-based businesses that actually meet those categories below, which are the same as the others. Who to contact in Tennessee. So here's a breakdown of our folks across the state and a contact map and areas that they cover. And those are the folks that came on and introduced themselves to you and kind of shows you the areas they're covering. That's their contact information. I'm down here in the bottom corner, and Joel Howard, our program director. I'm not sure if Joel's on the call today, but Joel Howard's our program director, and he is also a contacting. So any questions you have, feel free to reach out to any of us. The field staff are great. They'll do anything they can to help you. And his name's not listed on here, but Josh Wilkerson, our area director and covers business programs, is also a very good contact to reach out to. But that's pretty much all I have at this point. Troy, do you want to do questions now, or do you want to save them for the very end of the day?
Hey, we've got a couple. We've got 3 or 4. I'm trying to hit a couple right quickly here at this point. Dr. Hughes, I think, may have addressed these in the chat. One question was, if you have 2 operations, for example, bees and forestry, can you have 2 applications? I think Dr. Hughes has said no to that one.
Well, it depends on the ownership.
Okay.
If you've got a wife that owns, you can't have more than 75% common ownership amongst the entities. So depending on how you broke that down, if the wife completely owned the bee operation, the husband completely owned the logging operation, I guess in theory, you could do that, but you would have to provide documentation to that fact.
Gotcha. Okay. One of the others we had, if target market crosses state lines, does that disqualify the project?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
If target market crosses state lines, does that disqualify the project?
Well, I mean, the applicant has to be located in the state of Tennessee in order to apply with our staff. If you're in Kentucky, you'd apply with Kentucky or Georgia or wherever. If you're producing a locally produced agricultural food product and you're sitting in Clarksville, Tennessee, it allows you to go within 400 miles of your location. So in theory, from Clarksville, you could touch Kentucky, Missouri, Arkansas, Mississippi, all, within 400 miles.
Gotcha. Okay. I
So,
think that's what Dr. Hughes had indicated. So, okay. Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
All right.
Got a couple of, I'm going to save the others for just a little later when we have a break. We're right on time at the moment. Chuck, thank you for that. All that information you brought to us. We appreciate that. I know you'll be on with us, and we'll have some other questions as time moves along this morning. So thank you.
All right. Sounds good.
Thank you for all that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.